if you will go to the website and click on the tab that says Leader Translation. You want to download this, or at least have that available when you do your listening to these songs. So these are the English translations. And it's really important that you know what the text is speaking, what the singer is singing at each particular moment in the song, because that's a big part of what we're going to do, is to describe how the music then portrays the images of the text, the literal meaning, the psychological element, and so forth. So why don't you do that for Thursdays? Bring a copy of that, or if you have a laptop, you can refer to it that way. So today we're going to examine 3 Schubert Lieder. And Schubert is the greatest master of the art song. There are other composers who are in the same level of regard as far as the artistic value, but none is greater than Franz Schubert, and it really is the art song that Schubert is most famous for. So, Franz Schubert is the 4th of the Viennese classical composers. So, in a similar way to Beethoven, Schubert is a bridge between classicism and romanticism. And it's in his art songs that you see the most romantic elements of Schubert. So he is the youngest of the 4, so Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and then Schubert. Of the 4, he was the only one who spent his entire life in Vienna, and he died tragically at the age of 31, but was very prolific, extremely prolific. And he wrote, in total, over 600 art songs, and really is the composer who established this genre and brought it to this wonderful perfection that now is a treasured part of the repertoire. So with Schubert, we're going to see several things with his songs. He was very passionate in the way that he responded to this lyrical poetry. And his style is always described as having a sense of spontaneity about it. And so he wasn't a composer like what we see with Beethoven, who went through this long gestation period. Instead, Schubert would begin a song and could finish it in one day. In fact, they say that he could write 2 or 3 songs in a single day. It was that facile and that immediate in the way that he reacted to the poetry. So a very spontaneous expression. So Schubert wasn't particularly famous outside of Vienna. He had a close circle of friends who were very devoted to him. He was trained to be a school teacher. His father was a school teacher. And he did teach for 1 year, but he didn't like it, and apparently he spent all his time composing instead of teaching. And so he set out on this then ambition, to become a musician. And financially, he didn't really have a lot of success. And so he never had his own apartment. He always lived with friends. He lived a very bohemian lifestyle. He would get up early in the morning and compose every day, then In the afternoon, we go to coffee houses, we talk politics, talk art. In the evening, he'd get together with his friends. They would make music. There was a type of concert that they would present that would be entirely devoted to his music that they called Schubertiads. So that's something that's unique. And, you know, when he died, he basically had a few dollars, some unpublished manuscripts, his bedding, clothing, and that was it. So it was after his death that he became this internationally known genius composer. And it was the songs that were the most progressive, the most romantic in his output. So in writing sonata cycle works, those are important. They tend to be more classical in their orientation. They tended to be very long. Some would complain that he was long-winded. Robert Schumann spoke about this in the terms of heavenly lengths. And, but he was a little bit more traditional in his symphonies. With the exception of the last two, the unfinished, number 8, and the Great C Major. And in his piano sonatas, they tended to be more classical, with the exception maybe of the last 3, which were these tremendous masterpieces that were all written within about a 6-week period. So sonata cycle works tended to be more classical. He did write little character pieces, which are more romantic. And so works like his impromptus and his musical moments are this type of lyrical piano piece that becomes really popular in the Romantic period. And so we're going to see that and talk about that more with some works by Frédéric Chopin a little bit later. So you can see, you know, these two types of characteristics with Schubert, the one that's more classical with the sonata cycle works, and then the more romantic, which is with the art songs and with the lyrical piano pieces. So the sonata cycle works include the symphonies, the piano sonatas, the chamber music. That tends to be more classical. So, you know, he wrote a really famous quintet for strings and piano called Trout Quintet that's based on an art song. And so, the more romantic are leader, and then the piano character pieces. All right, so another important characteristic of Schubert is his originality as far as his harmonic language. He really developed a distinct sound and was very creative. And so his harmonies are more romantic. So whether it's in a sonata cycle work, which is an instrumental work, or his vocal works, music historians have described him as everything that he touched turned to song. So the lyrical aspect is a key element of Schubert. And it's interesting that he didn't really excel in opera. He tried to write opera, but that wasn't something that he was able to, successfully master. So he was at his best in these short, intimate, immediate expressions of this fantastic poetry, especially was interested in Goethe's poetry, set over 50 Goethe texts. And the first two that we're going to look at today are on Goethe texts. One is from the epic drama Faust. And then the second one is from a legend called the Earl King. And so these two songs, Gretchen at the Spinning Wheel and the Earl King, are early works. They were written 1814, 1815 when he was 17, 18 years old. And they're great examples of Schubert's incredible talent. All right, some other characteristics. No one was greater at creating pictorial effects with their music than Schubert. So we're going to put greatest master. Of pictorial effects. And so he could create with the piano figurations all variety of human emotions and gestures and nature, references and so forth. So that's what we're going to see in this first song is had this scene where the character Gretchen has fallen under the power of Faust, who's made this bargain with Mephistopheles, the devil, to have access to all the knowledge of the universe. And this is something which is forbidden, but Faust strikes this bargain. And but he's not supposed to use these powers for evil. But then the first thing he does is to fall, he wants to have Gretchen, and so he casts a spell on her. So she's totally under his control, and she is in this scene where she's sitting at the spinning wheel, and she is then just thinking of Faust, how much she loves him, how much she longs to be with him. And she becomes more and more agitated as she then is obsessing on him. And so you have these patterns in the piano that sound like a spinning wheel. And you have, with the left hand, like the idea of a treadle that's spinning the wheel. And you have all these things spinning in her head. And one of the things that Schubert does is to switch back and forth between modes. And it's kind of a Schubert characteristic to present a theme that's in a major key and then immediately restate it in the parallel minor, or vice versa. We'll see that a lot of times. We'll see that in the second song that we're going to look at. But at any rate, when she starts to think about Faust, then the music changes to major, to the major mode. So the original key is D minor, but then you have this section where she's thinking about his physical attributes, his lofty carriage, and the power of his eyes. Then when she thinks about the clasp of his hands, and then his kiss, on that word kiss, then everything has worked itself up to kind of a passionate moment with an accelerando, with a crescendo, and then the music comes to a stop, and it's like she loses consciousness for a second. And then little by little she kind of comes back to, and then kind of picks it up. The basic theme of the song is that my heart is heavy, my mind is distracted, I'll never find peace, never again. And so, it's the sense of despair. But it's like all she wants to do is just be with him this one last time. So, it's that type of of situation, which has, a very dramatic element. There's a supernatural element with this legend of Faust. And it's all about, passions and emotions, and these are all typical romantic themes. And we'll see this type of situation over and over again. So other things with Schubert that are characteristic, he makes use of folk elements. So you have Austrian dances like the Limler folk songs that would be recognizable, and his attitude was always one in which he viewed himself in service to the poet. So that was his mission, was to bring forth everything that was contained within this wonderful poetry. So his music, in his opinion, was something that was a vehicle for expressing the greatness and the power of the poetry, and in his view, that something which that was the whole point. So this first song. On identifying these, you can just give the English translation of the title. So the German of this first one is Gretchen am Spinnrad, but it translates Gretchen at the spinning wheel. So date of composition is 1814. The poet, and you need to know the poet for each one of these, Goethe. And you also need to be able just to give just a brief synopsis of what the poem is about. So this particular one has to do with the character Gretchen, who is sitting at her spinning wheel in her house, and she is thinking about Faust and how she's never going to find peace again, but all she wants is just to be with him and to die in his arms. So the particular form of this is a modified strophic. And each strophe begins with this recurring refrain, which is setting these two lines of the text. My peace is gone, my heart is heavy, I can never find peace, never again. So you will hear that 3 times. So there are 3 different strophes in this. Each of them is slightly different, although you do hear that returning refrain and melody at the beginning of each strophe. The middle strophe is the one in which then she's thinking about Faust's physical appearance, where it changes to F major, to the major mode. And then that leads to, the first arrival point, the emotional climax of the song, which is on the word kiss, kus.